After the Lions game preseason number 2, it's trade time. Add or subtract today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, Chiefs Kingdom. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. You can get after it right now at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet $5 and you can get a 3-week trial for free of Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. Check that out to get started. We are going to get started here, an aftermath show. As we get ready for a short week and looking at what the 53 can become, we have to take it. Who's the trending risers and fallers? Is what we saw yesterday real? We'll get to that coming up later in the show. Trade bait. Should they add or subtract a player, a position? Whatever it comes to, that's coming up later. But we start today where we should, in what the actual takeaways were that maybe went unforeseen. This is Chris Clark. I'm Ryan Tracy. Thanks for being with us. You can check everything that Chris is doing at KC Chiefs Corner, where there's some new content coming up here shortly. NFL 33 and RGR Football is where you can find me every single week, and check out Rogue APC if you want that much more on the athleticism that is now in this league and taking over. We thank you for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next one, especially if it's a division rival. You might get into some heated arguments over there. And make sure that you are ready for us by liking and subbing here on YouTube and getting on Spotify, Apple, and anywhere you can get a free audio podcast. You can get us 5 days a week. That text line for all the extra information, all the locos to hang out on, 816-357-8781. Now, playing time takeaways is always tough because we have a general feel as we break down the live stream post game. If you missed our post game live stream last night, make sure you bookmark that for next week. Post games are always a lot of fun. A couple of things were a little bit questionable in terms of the choices they made. For the most part, I feel like players who didn't play in this game likely have their either yay or nay, go or no go onto this roster pretty much set. And so much like around the league, I have a piece coming out in NFL 33 this week about how many teams are not playing their starters and didn't in week 2. The Chiefs bucked that trend, and I think there are some significant takeaways from it. Leading first to me at the linebacker spot, Jack Cochran did not play near as much as Cam Jones. Cam Jones, per PFS, is one of the best graded players on this ball game. Yet, I don't think Jack got it was not even a 2-to-1 ratio. So that tells me that this was trying to see what you had in Cam Jones. Jack Cochran is, I think, the 4. I don't know if that changed for you from yesterday, but anything in the snap counts that the linebackers take away?
I would agree with you. I think that you're in a situation where Cochran is probably your 4, and I think that they're trying to figure out who their 5 is. You saw a good play on special teams from Cam Jones, and didn't really see much. You saw a couple things from him, but he played a ton. And then you get into later in the game, and you get a guy in like Curtis Jacobs, who I thought was going to be somebody that could maybe push his way onto the roster. And he had some splash plays, but he's going up against the 3rd and 4th string of the Lions. So you have to take that into account. And it makes you wonder if they're going to probably only go with 5 linebackers. And one of the things that I think is also playing into this, and I actually have an article going up on Chiefs Corner tomorrow to talk about locks for the roster. Right now, I only have 3 linebacker locks. I think that they could keep 5. I don't think that they keep 6. But one of the reasons that I don't think they keep 6, and we talked about this earlier in the preseason, is I thought maybe with the new kickoff rules, they were going to have to keep that many. I'm not so sure that Carson Steele playing on the roster makes them only keep 5. You're potentially going to keep an extra running back that maybe we weren't thinking that they were going to keep early on. And that changes who's going to be needed for those kickoffs in that type of situation. So that could change things.
It definitely could. I feel like it was very intriguing to me because 24 snaps for Jacobs, 26 for Swayze Bowman, again, against an even further lower level of competition. I think both those guys look like practice squad candidates to me, but a little bit of flash goes a long way. You just have to take it up a notch. Unfortunately, we don't know what we're going to get from game 3. Andy Reid has been pretty traditional in how he uses players and his philosophy per game. The rest of the league's kind of off the tracks here. But if we see somebody get a start that I don't expect the starters to be in, we'll talk about that in our game preview coming up later in the week, folks. But I think that might sway some things about where guys get situated. The other thing that stood out to me as I looked at the offensive snaps, I expected Mike Caliendo to get a lot of snaps. He did. He led the team with 50 snaps because he played with the starters, the one at left guard. He was all over the interior on the twos, the threes, and I think he even got a couple of snaps against the fours. You found out, I think, as we discussed yesterday, where he should play, but who should play with him? It was 38 for Hansen. It was 35 for Norzad. We talked about them. This is what stood out to me. I did not expect that the next guy was Ethan Driscoll with 35 reps yesterday. We saw him on that long play with Deneric Prince where he got out and was a lead blocker and looked all the bit athletic as we had hoped, yet had some problems in pass pro in particular, but they got a very long look at him. Do you expect them to double down on that in this coming game to see? I don't think he can make the roster, but is there an outside chance?
Who's going to make the roster? Are they going to keep 4 tackles? I mean, that's really what the answer comes down to for me, because to me, if you're keeping a guy like Niang, who showed he doesn't have the athleticism to get out in space and, pick up somebody that's out there beyond the tight end, I don't think you can put him in a game and feel comfortable. I would feel much more comfortable with Driscoll, who at least can move. He may screw up, but he's at least got the uncoachable talent that you need to be able to get out in space and move. And I think that's huge. And the guy's huge. I mean, 6'8", he's a big boy. I think that you could actually develop something there. I mean, I don't know that he has really a great shot at the roster, but the bigger thing is Taylor going to be healthy? Is Morris going to be healthy? Are both those guys going to be ready to go week 1? Because if they're not, then you have to decide if you're keeping 4 tackles. And I would think that you have to make a decision. I would prefer they actually keep Driscoll over Niang, even though I understand what you're saying. He struggled. I still think there's more. I think there's more ability there, and he has intangibles you can't teach.
I agree, and I think a practice squad spot is a good spot. But let's see what happens in this last ball game. Again, we're going to give you a breakdown of what's coming. 53-man projection tomorrow. Matt Derrick the next day. Game 3 of the preseason preview the day after that, because that night cuts start, and we won't have another chance to give you the 53. So that's what we're thinking. But right now, before all that happens, the next few days could be optimal time to try to get a trade done. Who is the trade bait, either out there or on this roster? Coming up next. Passion, drive, patience. It brings the trophy home, just like the Chiefs have. And it can also affect your main vehicle, your ride or die. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain that vehicle, give it its peak performance, as well as over-the-top superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, everything to make it speedy, powerful, and stylish, all at eBay Motors, because they have you covered. Over 122 million parts for your ride or die, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, because eBay has a guaranteed fit. Your part will fit your ride every single time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're not burning cash. You're burning rubber. At least you're trying to. With all the parts that you need and the pieces that you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Guaranteed fit is available for U.S. customers only. Thanks for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen today. We truly appreciate it. Make your next listen Locked On Fantasy Football, because Vinny Iyer is getting you ready for all of your draft strategies. I'm listening to him every day because I have a new format that I need to win, and I need to hurt some people. So that's what I'm after. It's part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Trade bait. This is it. This is what we've been talking about, the volume and the lack of clarity at 2 positions in particular, I think leads to some opportunity here for Chiefs to trade away. And I think there's also opportunity to acquire some depth at another position. I would start with the cornerbacks. I have to say, I feel like there is such a plethora right now of the long, tall, skinny, physical press guys, because that's what Spags wants. And you got to have them in the pipeline. So I don't think you can deter anyone. But if there is an opportunity to trade away a position of strength right now, is the volume at cornerback. And I know people are a little bit nervous about who's going to be the number 2. I'm not talking about elite talent. I'm talking about guys that are going to have to be on the practice squad because they're not quite there enough. Like draft pick Kamal Hadden. I don't think he's shown enough for the Chiefs to put him on the 53. And I think rather than risk someone claiming him off of waivers, he's a guy that I think is a candidate at this point to maybe trying to recoup a draft capital that you spent on it. Do you see it that way, or am I crazy?
I'm not going to say you're crazy. The one thing I would say is, and we talked about this a little bit in the first segment, when we look at the playing time takeaway, Najee Johnson and Kelvin Joseph getting so many snaps really stands out. And then you wonder, okay, are those guys also going to get snaps in game 3? And the reason I bring that up is because they're trying to figure out who their number 2 is going to be. It looks like it could be Williams, but they're moving so many different pieces around. You have to wonder who they really feel comfortable with. And to play Najee and to play Joseph that late into the game, whether it's to get them snaps because they need it, or it's to figure out, who's doing what, and they're going to go back and watch the film. We'll see. I agree. Corner is one of those positions where I think that you have to feel like you have a plethora of guys. And I would say there's probably 4 that are locked on the roster right now at the corner position. McDuffie, Williams, Watson, and I would say Najee Johnson is on there as well. And I'm not counting Shamari Connor because I'm not sure if he plays corner or safety. He just seems to move all over.
Yeah.
But you get into some other guys, and there's some young guys that stood out. Roland Wallace stood out. That's somebody that I wasn't expecting to be able to step in and maybe, make this roster. And I think that there's a chance now based on the way he played yesterday and how much he played. So something to watch there. Wide receiver to me is a position that I'm not sure what they're going to do. You look at, I'd say there's 4 guys that we know, the top 4 guys we know, and then past that, it's a question mark. Are there people that are going to be interested in a guy like Kadarius Toney at this point? I wouldn't expect it, but that's a guy I'd hang out there and trade bait for a conditional pick of some sort, because I don't think you're going to get much else. And I can't see him making the roster after the way he played yesterday.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It comes down to how many can you fit on. I think you need to have a couple on the practice squad. That's certainly for real. But looking at the snap counts, I don't think Cornell Powell, despite the giant play and the fact that PFF graded him the best performer of the wide receiver group, he didn't earn himself a spot. Is it enough, though, to make him tradable? Would somebody give up something for a guy like that? Maybe a team down in Jacksonville who might have a quarterback that really has a connection with him. I don't know. I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, maybe. The other thing that stands out when you look at snap counts, Justin Ross had 30 snaps yesterday. That is a lot. He played 50% of the game at wide receiver. Is he going to make the roster? To me, it's up in the air. He's not locked to make the roster. It's a question whether or not he'll make it. I think the thing that stood out to me that I thought was interesting is you got to have a guy in Sky Moore who only got 17 reps and 2 returns, but he showed value in special teams with his return. And he is a guy that they seem very comfortable with and played with the 2s and pretty much came right out of the game. So I think he's a lot closer to being on this roster as more of a lock than anything else. And I wouldn't have expected that a couple weeks ago.
Fair enough. And I will say this. I think the Cap, in watching the game again, he's the best blocker they have that isn't Rashee Rice at the wide receiver position. So in terms of getting extra yards for Xavier Worthy or Hollywood Brown or in the run game, if you need someone on the edge to make a block, it's Sky Moore hands down over Justin Ross. I think it was interesting when we saw KT, Remigio, Ross, and Hardman out there at times together. I feel like Hardman's the best replacement in terms of like utility for Hollywood Brown, but maybe there's just not enough trust there. I don't think he played a ton of snaps. I think it was 13 by my count. Sorry, 14 total. Where do you sit on Mecole Hardman right now?
I think he's on the outside looking in, although he could end up being the return guy. I mean, that's the question, is who's going to be the returner, because LRZ, I can't imagine, is going to be on this roster, and that changes things, because if it's not going to be LRZ, who's going to be your returner? Is it going to be a guy like Sky Moore, who looked good yesterday returning? So did Remigio, but you saw how far Remigio was down on the roster when it comes to the wide receiver position. So it's really kind of an open guess right now. The one thing I will say, and we've talked about this a couple of times, Hardman doesn't have any guaranteed money. So it's possible that they cut him and they put him back on the practice squad, and nobody had signed him before, and he signed for a vet min deal. So maybe it's something that they look at is they put him on the practice squad, and they look at if Hollywood's not available, he could be a guy that they bring back on the practice squad and elevate for that game, for those 2 games that he's out.
That could be, and he's vested at this point. So you don't have to worry about waiver claims. He will decide where he wants to be. If he chooses to go to the Chiefs practice squad rather than sign with the Jets or anyone else, that's his decision to make. I just wonder if that's what you're feeling and you get to the point where you don't feel you need to elevate him. I do think he has a little bit of value out there, probably drastically more so than Kadarius Toney does at this point, more than Ramihia, more than Ross. So if you are looking to try to get something done from Brett Veach point of view, McCole seems to be the guy that I think probably stands out to me the most.
Yeah, and I could see that. That would make sense. The other position that I'm really curious about to see if they do anything is I know that you're going to get a Minahe back in November, more than likely. The question is what Minahe are you going to get back in November? He's been training really hard. There's lots of different things on X showing and Instagram of him showing, him training and trying to get back and get ready. But how quickly can he actually recover? And is it going to be the player that we saw at times last year versus a guy that maybe is a little bit of a half step slower, which is going to make a big difference in situations. And that's not a shot at him. It's just the reality of recovering from an injury like that. First year, it's going to be very hard. So do you look at adding a D end? And they have money that they could do that with right now. Although I know they're trying to get some other things done, but that's the big question is, do you look at adding a D end? Is there anybody out there that they could add that would add somebody that could maybe challenge FAU and push FAU to be the 3 or 4? Because I think they're going to need pass rush this season, and maybe even a little bit more so to protect their linebackers when it comes to the passing game to an extent.
Yeah. And I think all this is also part and parcel of if you're trying to make a player for player trade, because the one position I think the Chiefs could use a little bit still of talent is at the running back spot. For all the surge that we've seen from Carson Steele, I know I'm excited about that. A lot of folks don't see the production there. But that's okay. I can understand that as well. But I don't know that you see it from certainly from Clyde, because Clyde's not available at this point, and not from Deneric Prince either. So do you want to move one of these assets to try to get a running back asset? I think that's viable at this point. I don't know who might be a player in that, but there's got to be something out there rather than trying to wade through the waiver claims. Where do you see it?
Running back's tough. I think Pacheco's going to be closer to a 3-down running back this year. So I don't know how much real use there's going to be for a guy behind him. I'm not going to say that I don't want somebody behind him, but it's also going to make sense money-wise. And if they're going to try to extend some guys, maybe that's something that isn't going to work out. I could see them trying to look for a veteran, but does somebody want to come chase a ring and be here on a cheap deal? I mean, that's how I could see that working out. And I agree, waiver wires is probably not the way you want to go, but I don't know. It's really going to depend on what teams are looking for and if they have anybody that other teams are going to want. I would say that there's a couple positions that I think they have to feel pretty good that they have talent there that they could trade away.
I think that there's a little bit there. It depends on who can rise to the occasion. What is going on? Who made up ground after a little bit of rewatch? Risers and Fallers coming up next. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now they have a chance for you to do exactly what I do every single week. They have something a little bit different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube base plan account, all you got to do is watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. No problem. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. This is the exciting part of the show because what we see a glimpse of now can turn into a lot of improvement here coming up in the next few weeks and certainly into the season. What stands out to me about other rising players is someone we don't talk about enough on the defensive line, and that is Malik Herring. who I think has earned himself a roster spot at this point. I can't say he's going to be a starter anytime soon, but his versatility again wins out. He was out at edge yesterday, was able to get a little bit of pressure, was playing inside, can kind of supplement everything that's going on with who's available at both of those positions. Who did you see?
I agree with you. I think that Malik Herring is the guy that can do a lot of different things that are going to help the Chiefs, and I think that it could make one of the defensive tackles that we thought was going to make the roster maybe expendable. I'm not going to say that it's one of the the top 3 guys, obviously, but I think that you would have to feel like maybe they only go 40 defensive tackles to try to save a roster spot, and Malik Herring is the reason why they do it. We'll see how that ends up. When you start looking at guys that have trended in the right direction, Caliendo struggled at snapping. Obviously, we've seen that, and I think Norzad has shown that he has the ability to do that. But with how much they seem to trust him in all the different positions that he's played for this team on the interior, I think that is probably their guy that is going to be their main backup at that at the interior positions, even more so than maybe even Norzad at the center position. I think that they trust Caliendo and the snaps. You hope that you never have to have Creed out of there, but I think that he's a guy that's trended in the right direction, and you see how much they trust him and how much they want to get him reps, because I don't think he's going to get a ton and once the regular season starts, hopefully.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me as well. My question, and this is one I've been pawing at all night and today. Kelvin Joseph played a lot. Did he play himself onto the roster or off of it?
Well, he trended up during camp, but ever since he got injured, he's been trending down, and I'm not exactly sure if he went from a guy that I think was really pushing to try to make maybe a starter position at the corner spot to a guy that maybe played himself off the roster. It almost seems. I mean, with as much as he played yesterday, you didn't see him thrown at, which is a good sign for a corner. But the level of competition, he shouldn't have been thrown at. I mean, those are guys that aren't going to be playing in a couple of weeks for the most part. So the fact that he was so far down is interesting. I will say, though, and this is, I kind of rethought what I was saying earlier about him and Johnson. Maybe one of the reasons they got so many reps is because the team is looking at the fact that they think both of those guys are going to be on the roster, and they're not going to risk them next week, and they're going to let all the younger guys play to see what they have in those younger players. So I think he's trended down recently, but I don't know if it means that he's off the roster.
I agree with you. I actually feel like, despite giving up, what did he give up, 55 yards or something? I felt like that was a return to where it was earlier, where he was getting reps with the ones. Kei Taylor played 24 snaps, came out best graded because of the interception, again, against lower competition. But I feel like CRW, and Joseph getting that many reps now, if we don't see them playing this next one, I think that they're candidates for the roster, depending on how the rest of the math works out.
Yeah, I'm not so sure Taylor makes it. I thought he struggled yesterday playing up against the level of competition. Yeah, he got the interception, but he ran the route better than the wide receiver at that point. Right. Great play and heads up, getting the interception, getting his head around, not trying to take anything away from him. I just thought when you watch that long touchdown pass that they had, it would have been a tough tackle, but if he could have just gotten a hand on the guy and slowed him down, it doesn't become a touchdown at that point. Right. The guy ran right past him with the ball in his hands, and you have to at least make some kind of contact to slow him down, to allow people to get to you. If you can't bring him down, fine, but you got to do something more than he did.
I agree. And that's actually where I was going. Other than the interception, if it wasn't for that singular play, I think Kelvin Joseph outplayed him. But I also feel like Christian Wallace outplayed both of them. So, of the three, if you only have one spot, who you take?
That's tough. The way Christian Roland Wallace played, and the fact that they think that he can play both corner and safety, I would think actually puts him above the other two. And considering he's an undrafted free agent, and they are in a situation where he has the ability to grow into a position, and they played him at slot, which is a position they don't have a ton of depth at. I think that is bigger than a lot of people are going to give it credit for. And I'm not going to say he's on the roster automatically, but I would say that he is playing himself into a roster spot. And it'll be very intriguing to see if he plays much in this Thursday game, because maybe they already think he's going to be on the roster. I didn't think he had a chance when he started, but the fact that he came in, because he played slot mostly this game, but in game one, he played a lot of safety. So he's showing versatility, and that is a huge key to Andy Reid and this team, is how much can he do for me? And that goes back to the same thing that we talked about with Herring and Caliendo, and those types of guys are going to make your roster, because you're in a situation where you can do more for the roster. You can spread your time in, and you can do multiple things. So I think he has a definite chance at making this roster. Going to be really curious to see how that turns out. Did you see enough from Irv Smith in your mind for him to push to be the fourth tight end on this roster?
With the O-line and the wide receiver group, I have not. I like Irv. I'd put him on the practice squad in a break glass situation. I don't know that he's going to have a ton of interest around the league. He's made a couple of nice catches, but again, against the level of competition, it wasn't anything dominant, and I don't think that they see him in a position to overtake either the rookie or certainly not Noah Gray. Unless they make Noah the full-time long snapper. I don't think there's any kind of risk there. So I think Irv Smith might be a victim of roster math when it comes down.
Yeah. Another guy that I think is going to be a victim of roster math. I really haven't seen a trend for Hansen, but I do think that he's looking at, like, he's on the outside looking in, just based on the fact of where he's playing, how much he's playing. And it makes sense for where he's drafted. I think that, if this was several years ago and they didn't have the depth that they do, maybe he would be on the roster because they'd want to try to keep him. But at this point, I think that he is practice squad bound, and I don't think that that's going to be much of an issue. We'll see.
I agree, and I think that's perfectly fine. I do feel like there was interest in Haddon, and so I think he might have a little bit of trade value out there. I don't think the same would be said for Hansen. Now, Hansen was a 7th rounder. So we do have to take a question mark there. But Norzad, the 5th rounder, is definitely on this roster as far as I'm concerned. I think obviously the 4s, both Wiley and Hicks, definitely on the roster. And I think the way that boils down, if you can get both of all your draft picks onto at least the practice squad, I think you're doing well. If you can get something else for them in a logjam position, that may be the best way to go as well. What do you guys think? Who got themselves onto the roster? Who played themselves off of it?
I'm going to say something a little bit crazy, but I think Kansas City could have gotten two future starting players in the 4th round this year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. When Travis retires at 39, I think it could be on. So we're going to hold tight.
I think Hicks may have it next year. I'm not so sure that he's not showing that he could be a starter next year.
Well, and the observation that I had on rewatch today is that Hicks played high in split safety more than he did the first week. So I'm not sure he has to wait that long. If Justin Reid isn't able to go full, we might see that change a little bit. So we're going to play it by ear. Let us know who stood out to you, who's on the up, who's on the down, who has trade value. Leave your comments down below on YouTube or over in the reviews on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you're at. Have a great day. Tomorrow we are breaking it down, getting ready for the 53-man projection. Then Matt, and then our game preview for preseason game number 3, and then all the chaos starts. So get ready. Thanks for being with us. Check out another Locked On show on your way out the door. We appreciate you. We will talk to you tomorrow.